Lyra didn't know that the man watching her from across the ballroom was the most powerful alpha in the realm. She didn't know that her sister's mockery had just sealed both their fates, and she certainly didn't know that in 3 minutes her entire world would change forever. The borrowed dress hung loose on her frame, the pale blue fabric chosen specifically by her stepmother to wash out her complexion. Helena had insisted she wear it. "We can't have you outshining the real candidates," her sister had laughed, adjusting her own crimson gown that hugged every curve to perfection. Lyra pressed herself against the marble pillar, watching the glittering assembly of nobility swirl around the grand ballroom, the royal selection ball. Every unmated female in the kingdom had received an invitation, though everyone knew it was mere formality. The Alpha King would choose someone suitable, someone pure-blooded, someone worthy, someone who wasn't her. "Look at her hiding like a wounded animal," Helena's voice carried across the space between them, pitched perfectly for the cluster of noble daughters surrounding her. "Did you know she actually thought she had a chance tonight?" Laughter rippled through the group, sharp and cutting. Lyra's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes fixed on the golden chandelier above, counting the crystals to keep from crying. "Poor thing doesn't realise," continued Lady Vivian, Helena's closest friend. "Mixed blood like that, she'd be lucky to catch a Beta's attention, let alone—" "The Alpha King would never," Helena interrupted, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You'll never be chosen, Lyra. Look at you. Nobody wants damaged goods." The words hit like physical blows. Damaged goods. That's what her step-family had called her since the day her father brought her home at age 7, the bastard daughter with wolf blood, too weak to shift properly. The child whose mother had died in shame, leaving behind only whispers and a daughter who would never quite belong anywhere. Lyra closed her eyes, fighting the familiar ache in her chest. The same ache that flared whenever she watched other wolves shift effortlessly, whenever she felt the incomplete tug of her own wolf trying desperately to surface. Half-blood, not enough of either world to claim a place in any. She should leave, slip out through the servants' quarters before the actual selection began. Save herself the humiliation of standing with the others when the Alpha King made his inevitable choice of someone suitable, someone whole. But something made her lift her head. A sensation like warmth spreading through her chest, golden and impossible. Her breath caught as her gaze swept across the ballroom and found him. Tall, devastatingly handsome. Dressed in midnight black that made his silver eyes seem to glow in the candlelight. He stood apart from the crowd, completely still except for those eyes that tracked her every movement with predatory intensity. Their gazes locked. The warmth in her chest flared into something molten, something that stole her breath and made her wolf stir for the first time in months. A golden thread seemed to shimmer between them, visible only to her, connecting them across the impossible distance of the ballroom. Impossible. He was beautiful in the way that powerful men were beautiful, sharp-edged and dangerous, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. The kind of man who could have any woman in the kingdom with a single glance. And he was staring at her. Lyra looked away quickly, certain she'd imagined it. Men like that didn't notice girls like her, especially not when the ballroom was filled with stunning, pure-blooded daughters of nobility. She must have misunderstood. He'd probably been looking at someone behind her, someone worthy of that intense focus. When she dared to glance back, he was gone. Relief and disappointment warred in her chest. Of course, she'd been foolish to think otherwise, even for a moment. The golden warmth faded, leaving her feeling hollow and small in the borrowed dress that would never fit properly. "Did you see the way she was staring?" Helena's voice cut through the music, louder now, meant to be heard. As if someone like him would ever notice someone like her. The delusion is almost pitiful. More laughter. Lyra bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper, using the pain to keep tears at bay. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. The music shifted, becoming something slower, more formal. The selection dance. Lyra's stomach clenched as the eligible women began arranging themselves in a line along the edge of the ballroom, their gowns creating a rainbow of silk and hope. Helena took her place at the front, of course. Beautiful, confident Helena, with her pure alpha bloodline and her certainty that she deserved everything good the world had to offer. The other noble daughters flanked her, each one stunning in their own right, each one infinitely more suitable than a half-blood bastard in a borrowed dress. Lyra remained by her pillar, watching. This wasn't for her. It had never been for her. The great doors at the far end of the ballroom opened with ceremonial grandeur. A hush fell over the assembly as footsteps echoed across marble, measured and sure. The Alpha King had arrived. Lyra's heart stuttered as the same impossible man from across the ballroom appeared in the doorway, but now she could see him clearly. The crown that caught the light like stars, the bearing that spoke of absolute power, the way every person in the room bent their heads in deference to his presence. This was the Alpha King, the man whose eyes had found hers across a crowded ballroom, and he was walking straight toward the line of waiting women, ready to choose his queen. Helena's triumphant smile was radiant as she stepped forward slightly, presenting herself with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her worth. The other women held their breaths, each hoping to catch his attention. But the Alpha King's silver eyes weren't scanning the line of eligible brides. They were searching the crowd. They were searching for her. The golden thread flared to life again, so bright and warm that Lyra gasped. Across the ballroom, the Alpha King's gaze found hers with the precision of a hunting wolf spotting its prey. And then he smiled. Not the polite smile of a king acknowledging his subjects, not the practiced charm of a ruler playing his part. A real smile, slow and devastating, and meant entirely for her. He began to move through the crowd, and Lyra's world tilted on its axis, because he wasn't walking toward the line of noble daughters waiting to be chosen. He was walking toward her. The ballroom held its breath as the Alpha King cut through the crowd with predatory grace. Conversations died mid-sentence. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the musicians seemed to slow their tempo, as if the very air had thickened around his presence. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs as he moved closer, each step deliberate and unhurried. He passed Lady Catherine without a glance, stepped around the Duke's eldest daughter as if she were invisible, ignored the desperate flutter of fans and batting eyelashes from every eligible woman in his path. His silver eyes never left Lyra's face. This had to be some mistake, some cosmic joke. Men like him, kings like him, didn't choose girls like her. Not when goddesses stood waiting in perfect lines, each one more beautiful than the last. Helena's triumphant smile began to waver as the Alpha King passed the first woman in line, then the second, then the third. Her confident posture shifted slightly as he continued walking, his destination becoming impossibly, undeniably clear. "No," Lyra whispered, pressing harder against the marble pillar. "There's been a mistake." But he was almost close enough to touch now, and the golden warmth in her chest blazed like a second sun. Her wolf, dormant for so long, stirred with desperate recognition. The scent of him reached her, pine and rain, and something wild that made her knees weak. The Alpha King stopped directly in front of her. Up close, he was devastating. Tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze, broad-shouldered in a way that spoke of real strength rather than ceremonial power. His dark hair was perfectly styled, except for one stubborn strand that fell across his forehead, making him seem almost human despite the crown that caught the chandelier light. But it was his eyes that undid her, silver like moonlight on water, and focused on her with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the room. He extended his hand, palm up, an invitation, a choice. "Dance with me," he said, and his voice was everything she'd imagined it would be. deep and warm with just a hint of roughness that sent shivers down her spine. The ballroom had gone completely silent. 1,000 eyes burned into Lyra's back, but she couldn't look away from his face, from the way he waited, patient and sure, as if her answer was the only thing in the world that mattered. She glanced desperately at the line of noble daughters, at Helena's stricken expression, at the sea of shocked faces surrounding them. "There's been a mistake. I'm nobody." Something shifted in his expression, not disappointment, but something fiercer. His hand remained extended between them, steady as stone. "You're everything," he said quietly, and the words hit her like a physical blow, not a question, not a suggestion. A statement of absolute fact delivered with the quiet authority of a man who had never been wrong about anything that mattered. The golden thread between them pulsed with warmth that travelled from her chest down to her fingertips. Her wolf whimpered with desperate want, clawing at the barriers she'd built to keep it contained. Slowly, hardly daring to breathe, Lyra placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused and impossibly gentle. The moment their skin touched, fire shot up her arm and settled somewhere behind her sternum like a second heartbeat. He felt it too. She saw the flash of recognition in his silver eyes, the slight widening that spoke of surprise even from a king. The crowd parted as he led her onto the dance floor, their whispers following like a rising tide. "Did you see the Alpha King chose—" "Who is she?" "Nobody knows." "Helena's sister." "The bastard?" Each whisper was a knife between her shoulder blades, but the Alpha King's hand at her waist anchored her. His other hand held hers with careful reverence, as if she were made of spun glass and precious metal. The music began again, something slow and formal that she'd learned in secret by watching the palace servants practice. He led her into the first turn with effortless skill, his movements fluid and sure. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "Lyra." The word came out as barely a whisper. "Lyra Ashwood, but you should know. My father, he's just—" "The Earl of Millbrook," he finished, surprising her. "I know who your father is. I know who you are." That couldn't be right. Her father barely acknowledged her existence, let alone spoke of her to anyone important. She was the shameful secret he kept hidden away, the reminder of his youthful indiscretion with a wolf-blooded woman who died rather than face the scandal of bearing his child. "Then you know I don't belong here," she said, stumbling slightly as he spun her with practised ease. "I'm not. I can't. My blood is mixed. My wolf is broken. I'm nothing like the women you should choose from." His hand tightened on her waist, pulling her closer. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his silver eyes, close enough that his scent wrapped around her like a claiming. "Stop," he said firmly. "Who told you these things? Who made you believe you were broken?" The question caught her off guard. In all her life, no one had ever suggested that the problem might not be with her, that the voices telling her she was worthless might be wrong rather than truthful. "Ah, everyone," she whispered. "Everyone knows what I am." "What you are," he repeated slowly, "is mine." The possessive word sent heat racing through her veins. Around them, the other dancers gave them a wide berth, as if sensing the electricity crackling between them. At the edge of the dance floor, Helena stood frozen in her crimson gown, her face white with shock and something that might have been fear. "You don't understand," Lyra tried again. "I'm not suitable. I can't shift properly. My wolf is—" "Perfect," he interrupted, spinning her out and drawing her back with fluid precision. "Your wolf is perfect because it's yours, because you're perfect." "You don't even know me." Something flickered in his expression then, something that looked almost like pain. "I've been looking for you my entire life. I know you better than you know yourself." The music swelled around them, and Lyra found herself swept up in his certainty, in the way he looked at her like she was precious beyond measure, like she was worth crossing a crowded ballroom for, like she was worth claiming in front of the entire nobility. "Who are you?" she breathed, though part of her already knew. The crown should have given it away immediately, but his presence was so overwhelming that details like royal regalia seemed almost secondary. His smile was soft and devastating. "Adrian Blackwood, Alpha King of the Northern Territories." He paused, his silver eyes holding hers captive. "Your mate." The word hit her like lightning. Mate. The thing she'd dreamed of and given up hope of ever finding. The other half of her soul that every wolf yearned for but few were lucky enough to claim. "That's impossible," she whispered, but even as she said it, she felt the truth of it in the golden thread connecting them, in the way her broken wolf had awakened the moment he'd looked at her, in the rightness of his arms around her, the perfect fit of her hand in his. "Nothing about this is impossible," he said, guiding her through another turn as the music reached its crescendo. "It's destiny." The dance ended with her pressed close against his chest, his hand still at her waist, their faces inches apart. Around them, the ballroom erupted in whispers and speculation, but Lyra could barely hear them over the thundering of her own heart. "I don't understand any of this," she admitted. "You don't have to," he said gently. "Not yet. Just trust that you're exactly where you're supposed to be." At the edge of the dance floor, Helena pushed through the crowd, her perfect composure finally cracking. "There must be some mistake, Your Majesty. Lyra isn't... she's not..." "She's what?" Adrian's voice carried the quiet danger of a predator protecting his territory. He didn't look away from Lyra's face, but his words cut through the sudden silence like a blade. Helena faltered, seeming to realize for the first time that she was speaking to an alpha whose power could end her with a thought. "I only meant—" "You meant to insult my mate in front of my court," Adrian said, still not turning to look at her. "Choose your next words very carefully." The threat was velvet soft and absolutely lethal. Helena's mouth opened and closed soundlessly before she retreated back into the crowd, her face burning with humiliation. "Your mate," Lyra repeated numbly. "You really mean it." "I've never meant anything more in my life," he said, finally stepping back but keeping her hand clasped in his. "The question is whether you're brave enough to believe it." Before she could answer, he lifted their joined hands to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was courtly, proper, but the heat in his eyes was anything but. "Think about it," he murmured against her skin. "I'll find you when you're ready to talk." And then he was gone, melting back into the crowd with the same predatory grace that had brought him to her side. Lyra stood alone on the dance floor, her hand still tingling from his kiss, her mind reeling from everything that had just happened. Around her, the ballroom buzzed with renewed speculation, but all she could think about was the way he'd said, "my mate," like it was a sacred vow, like she was something precious, like she was everything. The days that followed were a whirlwind of impossibilities that Lyra couldn't quite believe were real. She woke each morning in chambers that belonged in fairy tales, silk hangings in deep emerald, windows that overlooked gardens where roses bloomed in defiance of the season, a bed so soft she felt guilty for sleeping in it. The servants who attended her spoke in hushed, reverent tones, as if she was something precious rather than the half-blood bastard who'd stumbled into their lives by accident. Because surely that's what this was, an accident, a case of mistaken identity that would be corrected any day now. "Your breakfast, my lady," Marie, her assigned lady's maid, said softly as she set a tray laden with delicacies on the small table by the window. Fresh berries that must have cost a fortune, bread that was still warm from the ovens, honey that caught the morning light like liquid gold. My lady, as if she were someone worthy of titles. "Thank you," Lyra murmured, though her stomach was too twisted with anxiety to manage more than a few bites. 3 days in the palace, and she still felt like an imposter wearing someone else's life. The Alpha King, Adrian, had been true to his word about giving her time to think, but he hadn't disappeared entirely. Each morning brought some small gesture that made her chest tight with confused warmth. Yesterday, a book of poetry had appeared on her nightstand, the leather binding worn soft with age. The day before, a single white rose had been waiting by her window, its petals still damp with dew. Today, it was a note written in strong, elegant handwriting. "Walk with me in the garden when you're ready. No pressure, just a conversation." A. Lyra traced the letters with her fingertip, her heart doing something complicated behind her ribs. He was being so patient, so gentle, nothing like what she'd expected from a king who could command anything he wanted with a single word, which only made this harder. She dressed carefully in one of the gowns that had appeared in the wardrobe, deep blue silk that actually fit her properly, unlike anything she'd ever owned. The mirror showed a stranger, a young woman with careful braids and a dress that cost more than her father's servants made in a year. She looked like she could belong here. The thought terrified her. The garden was a maze of carefully tended paths and sculptured hedges with hidden alcoves where lovers might steal private moments. Lyra found Adrian near the rose arbour, standing with his back to her as he watched a pair of sparrows chase each other through the flowering vines. He'd traded his crown for simple clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders. Without the royal regalia, he looked younger, more approachable, more like the kind of man who might actually choose her for reasons that had nothing to do with political manoeuvring. "You came," he said without turning around, and she heard the smile in his voice. "You said we could just talk." She stayed several feet away, her hands twisted in her skirts. I thought I owed you that much." "You don't owe me anything." He turned then, and those silver eyes found hers with the same devastating intensity she remembered from the ballroom. "I asked for your time, not your obligation." He gestured to a stone bench nestled between two flowering bushes. "Will you sit with me?" She perched on the edge of the bench, hyper-aware of the space between them when he settled beside her. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that she could smell that intoxicating scent of pine and rain that made her wolf stir restlessly. "Tell me about yourself," he said quietly. "Not what others have told you about yourself, what you know to be true." The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. They'd all been too busy telling her what she was to bother asking what she thought about it. "I don't know how to answer that," she admitted. "Start simple. What do you like to do?" She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. "I like to read, old stories mostly, tales about brave women who saved themselves." She glanced at him sideways. Helena always said it was foolish, that real women don't go on adventures. Helena was wrong about a lot of things. His voice carried an edge that made Lyra shiver. "What else?" "I like to watch the sunrise from the kitchen garden. The light is different there, softer. And I like to help with the younger servants' children. They don't care about bloodlines or proper breeding. They just want someone to tell them stories." "You're good with children." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "They're honest. If they don't like you, they tell you. If they do like you, they show you. There's no pretense. Unlike court life. Unlike everything else." She risked a glance at his face, surprised by the understanding she found there. "You must think I'm naive." "I think you're refreshing." He leaned back against the bench, his posture relaxed despite the intensity of his gaze. "Do you know what it's like to be surrounded by people who tell you what they think you want to hear?" She shook her head. "Exhausting," he said simply. "To never know if someone's interest is genuine or calculated. To have every conversation feel like a chess match where everyone's angling for advantage." Something in his voice made her look at him more closely. Beneath the confident exterior, she caught a glimpse of something that looked almost lonely. "Is that why you've never chosen a mate before?" she asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "Everything about me is your business now," he said softly. "And yes, that's part of it. I've been waiting for someone who would see me rather than my crown. Someone who would choose me rather than my title." But you barely know me. How can you be certain that we're... She stumbled over the word mate, still unable to say it aloud. When I was 12 years old, my mother took me to see the oracle. His voice carried the weight of old grief. She told me I would know my mate the moment I saw her, that she would be everything I'd never thought to ask for and everything I'd always needed. He turned to face her fully, his silver eyes holding her captive. She said I would recognize her by the way her soul called to mine, by the way her presence would make the broken pieces of me feel whole again. Your Majesty. Adrian, he corrected gently. Just Adrian, when we're alone. Adrian. His name felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. I'm nobody special. I'm the illegitimate daughter of a minor lord. I can't shift properly. My wolf is so damaged that most of the time I can't even feel her. How can I possibly be what you need? His hand moved slowly toward hers, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, his fingers covered hers with gentle warmth. Your wolf isn't damaged, he said firmly. She's been suppressed, told she wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't worthy enough to emerge. But I can feel her, Lyra. She's magnificent. That's impossible. Is it? When I touch you, doesn't she stir? When you look at me, doesn't something inside you recognize what I am to you? She couldn't deny it. The golden thread between them pulsed with warmth every time he was near. Her wolf, dormant for so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like, had been restless and yearning ever since that first night in the ballroom. This is too fast, she whispered. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. I'm not asking you to be anything other than yourself. His thumb traced gentle circles across her knuckles. I'm asking you to trust that who you are is exactly what I've been searching for. What if you're wrong? What if you wake up tomorrow and realize you've made a mistake? Pain flashed across his features, so quick she might have imagined it. Is that what you're afraid of? That I'll leave? She nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Lyra. Her name was a caress on his lips. Look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes, seeing nothing but steady certainty in their silver depths. I have waited 30 years for you, he said quietly. 30 years of empty ballrooms and meaningless conversations and wondering if I would spend my entire life alone. Do you really think I would walk away from the one person who makes me feel like I'm finally home? Everyone leaves, she whispered, the words torn from somewhere deep and wounded inside her. My mother died. My father pretends I don't exist. Helena hates me. Everyone always leaves. I won't. The promise was absolute, delivered with the kind of conviction that could move mountains. However long you need to believe that, I'll wait. However long you need to heal, I'll be here. I'll wait, Lyra. However long you need, I'll wait. The golden thread between them flared so bright and warm that she gasped. For just a moment she could feel it, her wolf pressing against the barriers she'd built, desperate to reach toward his certainty, desperate to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of being chosen. I don't know how to trust this, she admitted. Then don't trust it yet. He lifted their joined hands to press a soft kiss to her palm. Trust me instead, one day at a time, one moment at a time. Let me prove to you that some things are worth believing in. As he spoke, Lyra became aware of approaching footsteps on the garden path. They broke apart just as Helena appeared around the hedge, resplendent in a pale pink gown that emphasized her perfect golden beauty. "Sister," Helena said with a smile that was all sharp edges, "how lovely to find you here, and your Majesty, what an unexpected pleasure." Adrian rose smoothly, his expression shifting into polite neutrality. "Lady Helena, to what do I owe the honour?" "I've come to collect Lyra, actually. Our stepmother has requested her presence for tea." Helena's gaze flicked between them, calculating. "I'm sure you understand the importance of family obligations." "Of course." Adrian's voice was perfectly courteous, but Lyra caught the subtle tension in his shoulders. Lyra, Shall I escort you back to the palace? That won't be necessary, Helena interrupted smoothly. I'll take excellent care of her, as I always have. The lie was delivered with such practised sincerity that Lyra almost believed it herself, almost forgot the years of small cruelties, the constant reminders of her inadequacy, the way Helena had delighted in watching her shrink into herself. I should go, Lyra said quietly, rising from the bench. The spell of the garden was broken now, reality crashing back in to remind her of everything she was and wasn't. Lyra. Adrian's voice stopped her before she could follow Helena. Remember what we discussed? Some things are worth believing in. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and let Helena lead her away. But she could feel his gaze following her until they disappeared around the hedge, and the warmth of it stayed with her long after the garden was out of sight. The weeks that followed were a strange rhythm of stolen moments and growing shadows. Lyra found herself caught between two worlds, the golden warmth of Adrian's patient courtship and the cold reality of court politics that seemed to close in around her with each passing day. Every morning brought fresh flowers to her chambers, every afternoon a new book of poetry, or a handwritten note inviting her to walk through different parts of the palace grounds. Adrian never pressed, never demanded more than she was ready to give, but his presence was a constant thread of light in the growing darkness. It was the whispers that wore her down first. "Mixed blood," she heard a duchess murmur behind her fan as Lyra passed in the corridor. "The bastard thinks she can be queen," another voice added, with barely concealed disgust. "It's unseemly, really, the Alpha King lowering himself to—" Lyra had learned to keep walking, to pretend the words didn't land like physical blows. But each comment chipped away at the fragile confidence Adrian's attention had begun to build in her. She was arranging the latest bouquet, white roses with trailing ivy, when she heard voices in the corridor outside her chambers. Helena's voice, pitched low, but not quite low enough. "I'm telling you, Marcus, this cannot continue. She's making a mockery of everything our bloodlines stand for." Lyra's blood went cold. Alpha Marcus of the Western Territories. She knew that name from whispered court gossip. A powerful alpha who'd been vying for alliance with Adrian's kingdom for years. Also, a man who'd made his opinions about pure bloodlines abundantly clear. "The Alpha King seems quite taken with her," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the rumble of barely controlled aggression. "Perhaps we should wait and see if this infatuation runs its course." "It won't." Helena's voice was sharp with frustration. "You don't understand. He's serious about her. He's actually considering making that half-breed his queen. Then perhaps it's time for more direct action." Lyra pressed herself against the door, her heart hammering as she strained to hear more. But their voices had dropped too low, becoming nothing more than an indistinct murmur, punctuated by Helena's occasional bitter laugh. When their footsteps finally faded, Lyra sank onto her bed, her hands shaking. More direct action. What did that mean? What were they planning? She should tell Adrian. Should warn him that Helena was meeting secretly with rival alphas, that there were plots forming in the shadows of his own court. But what if he thought she was being paranoid? What if he realized that the political complications of choosing her weren't worth the trouble? What if he decided Helena was right, and she really was just a bastard making a mockery of everything his bloodline stood for? 3 days later, her worst fears crystallized into reality. She was coming back from the library, her arms full of books Adrian had recommended, when she rounded the corner to find Helena waiting in her chambers with Lady Vivienne and 2 other noble daughters she recognized from the selection ball. "Sister," Helena said with that familiar sharp smile, "we need to talk." "I was just going to read," Lyra said carefully, clutching the books against her chest like armour. "About that?" Helena gestured to an empty chair with mock courtesy. "Sit down, Lyra. It's time someone told you the truth about your situation here." Lyra remained standing. "What truth?" "The truth that you're living in a fantasy." Lady Vivian's voice dripped with false sympathy. "The Alpha King is being kind to you, yes, but kindness isn't the same as genuine interest." You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Helena stood, moving with predatory grace to the window that overlooked the gardens, where Lyra and Adrian had shared so many quiet conversations. Do you know what the Council of Alphas said when word reached them about his choice? They're threatening to withdraw their support, to question his fitness to rule. That's not true, isn't it? Alpha Marcus has been quite vocal about his concerns. So has Lord Blackthorn. They're saying that any king who would consider a half-blood bastard as a mate clearly lacks the judgment necessary to lead. The words hit like physical blows, each one finding its mark with surgical precision. Lyra felt the careful walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crumble. The kingdom needs stability, Lady Catherine added, her voice gentler but no less devastating. Not the chaos that comes from a queen who can barely shift, who has no political connections, no dowry, no bloodline worth claiming. You're being cruel for no reason, Lyra whispered. We're being realistic. Helena moved closer, her perfect face arranged in an expression of sisterly concern that didn't quite hide the satisfaction in her eyes. Do you really think the Alpha King can afford to choose his own desires over the good of his people? Do you think he should? The question hung in the air like a blade. Because that was the cruelest part of it. Helena was right. Adrian had responsibilities that went far beyond his own happiness, far beyond whatever inexplicable attraction had drawn him to the broken half-blood hiding in the shadows. He deserves better, Lyra said quietly, the admission tearing something vital inside her chest. Yes, Helena agreed, with gentle viciousness. He does, and if you truly care about him, you'll stop being selfish and do what's best for everyone. Which is? Leave, quietly, before you cause any more damage to his reputation or his kingdom. The books tumbled from Lyra's numb fingers, hitting the floor with soft thuds that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. Around her, the noble daughters watched with the satisfied expressions of hunters who'd just cornered their prey. Think about it, Helena said, as she swept toward the door, her companions trailing behind her like silk-clad wolves. Do you really want to be the reason the Alpha King loses the respect of his people? Do you want to be the weakness his enemies use against him? They left her alone with the scattered books and the terrible weight of questions she didn't know how to answer. That night, Lyra made her decision. She packed quietly, taking only what she brought with her, which was almost nothing. The beautiful gowns stayed in the wardrobe, the jewels remained in their velvet-lined boxes. She would leave as she'd arrived, with nothing but the borrowed dress on her back and the knowledge that she was doing the right thing for Adrian, the right thing for his kingdom, the right thing for everyone except the part of her that felt like it was dying with every folded garment she left behind. She was halfway to the stables when she heard footsteps behind her. Going somewhere? Adrian's voice stopped her cold. She turned slowly, her heart clenching at the sight of him in the moonlight. He was dressed simply, dark trousers and a white shirt that gleamed silver in the darkness, but his presence still took her breath away. I thought you were asleep, she said weakly. I felt you leaving. He moved closer, his silver eyes searching her face. The bond, Lyra. When you're in pain, I feel it. When you're afraid, I know it. So I'll ask again, where are you going? Home. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. I'm going home. This is your home. No. She forced herself to take a step back, then another. This was never my home. I was just visiting. What happened? His voice carried a note of command that made her wolf whimper in submission. Someone said something to you. Someone hurt you. Tell me who. It doesn't matter who. What matters is that they're right. She clutched her small bag tighter, using the pain of her fingernails digging into her palms to keep from breaking down completely. I don't belong here, Adrian. I never did. You need someone who can stand beside you as an equal. Not someone who weakens you just by existing. You don't weaken me. You make me stronger. Your Council of Alphas doesn't think so. Alpha Marcus doesn't think so. Half your court thinks you've lost your mind, and the other half is waiting to see how long it takes you to come to your senses." Understanding dawned in his expression, followed quickly by something that might have been rage. "Helena, it doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that it's true." Tears she'd been holding back all evening finally spilled over. "You're going to be a great king, Adrian, but not if you're tied to someone like me. Not if your people can't respect the woman you choose." "My people will learn to respect who I tell them to respect." "That's not how it works, and you know it." She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, hating that she was crying, hating that she was weak. "A kingdom divided can't stand. You taught me that when you gave me that book about the War of 7 Crowns. Remember? About how King Aldrich fell because he put his personal desires above the good of his realm?" The reference to their quiet conversation in the garden hit its mark. She saw him flinch, saw the moment when her words found their target. "That's different," he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Is it? You're asking your people to accept a half-blood bastard as their queen. You're asking them to bow to someone who can't even shift properly. How is that not putting your desires above their needs?" "Because you're not just my desire." His voice broke on the words. "You're my mate, my other half, the missing piece of my soul that I've been searching for my entire life." "Then maybe," she whispered, each word a knife in her own heart, "maybe the moon goddess made a mistake." The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian stood frozen, his face a mask of pain so profound that Lyra had to look away. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Do you really believe that?" She wanted to say no, wanted to throw herself into his arms and beg him to fight for them, consequences be damned, but the image of his kingdom divided, his people questioning his judgment, his enemies circling like vultures. It was too much. She couldn't be the reason his reign crumbled. "I have to," she said instead. "Lyra, please." She took another step backward. "Let me go. Let me disappear before I cause any more damage." She turned and ran before he could respond, her feet flying over the cobblestones as she raced toward the stables. Behind her, she heard him call her name once, the sound roar with anguish, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop, because stopping meant facing the truth, that she was a coward who was abandoning the first person who'd ever seen her as worth fighting for. But sometimes love meant letting go, even when it destroyed you in the process. Lyra made it exactly 3 steps into the stable courtyard before the attack came. The shadow detached itself from behind the water trough with inhuman speed, a blade gleaming silver in the moonlight as it arced toward her throat. Years of suppressed wolf instincts exploded to life in that instant, her body moving before her mind could process the danger, throwing herself sideways as the assassin's blade whistled through the space where her neck had been a heartbeat before. She hit the cobblestones hard, her bag flying from nerveless fingers as she rolled behind a wooden cart. Her wolf surged to the surface for the first time in years, bringing with it strength and speed she'd forgotten she possessed. "Little half-breed thinks she can run," the assassin hissed, stalking toward her hiding place with predatory patience. Male. Alpha-born, judging by the power radiating from him. "Alpha Marcus sends his regards." Terror crystallized into fury. Helena's ally. The man who'd been meeting in secret corners, plotting her downfall. Only apparently Helena's idea of more direct action involved making sure Lyra never made it out of the palace alive. The assassin rounded the cart just as Lyra's wolf finally broke free. Her shift wasn't complete, would probably never be complete, not with her mixed blood, but it was enough. Enough to give her claws that raked across the assassin's forearm when he lunged for her. Enough to give her speed that carried her beyond his reach as he cursed and stumbled backward. She ran, not toward the palace gates as she'd originally planned, but back toward the palace itself, toward safety, toward Adrian. But the assassin was faster. He caught her at the base of the great stairs, his hand fisting in her hair as he yanked her backward against his chest. The knife pressed cold against her throat, just shy of breaking skin. "Should have stayed hidden in whatever hole you crawled out of," he breathed against her ear. "Now you've forced us to get messy. Let her go." The voice came from the shadows above, low and deadly, and carrying the kind of power that made the assassin's grip falter. Adrian stepped into the moonlight at the top of the stairs, and Lyra had never seen anything more terrifying or beautiful in her life. Gone was the patient, gentle man who'd courted her with flowers and poetry. This was the Alpha King in all his primal fury, silver eyes blazing with rage that seemed to make the very air shimmer with heat. Power rolled off him in waves that had the assassin stumbling backward despite himself. "Your Majesty," the man managed, though his voice shook with the effort of speaking past Adrian's overwhelming presence. "This doesn't concern you, just a small matter of kingdom security." "You dared to harm what is mine." Adrian's voice was barely recognizable, distorted by the wolf that was clearly fighting to break free. "You put your hands on my mate." He began descending the stairs with predatory grace, each step deliberate and unhurried. Behind him, palace guards emerged from doorways and alcoves, surrounding the courtyard with efficient precision. But their presence felt almost secondary. This was between an alpha and the man who'd threatened his mate. "She's not your mate," the assassin protested, backing toward the fountain with Lyra still clutched against his chest. "She's an abomination, a half-blood bastard who's bewitched you somehow. Alpha Marcus is just trying to save your kingdom from—" "Marcus." Adrian's lips curved in something that might charitably be called a smile. "I should have known. Tell me, did my dear cousin promise you land for this title, or are you simply so pathetic that you'll take orders from a woman scorned?" "Helena. Of course Helena was involved." Lyra closed her eyes, sick with the realization that her own sister had tried to have her killed rather than simply let her leave quietly. "The council won't stand for this," the assassin said desperately. "They'll never accept her as queen. You're destroying everything for a woman who isn't worth—" He never got to finish the sentence. Adrian moved faster than human eyes could follow, covering the distance between them in a blur of motion that ended with his hand around the assassin's throat. The knife clattered to the cobblestones as the man was lifted bodily off his feet, his legs kicking uselessly as Adrian held him suspended with one arm. "Her worth," Adrian said conversationally, as if he weren't slowly strangling a man, "is not up for discussion." Lyra stumbled away from them both, her hand pressed to her throat where the blade had rested. Around the courtyard she could see more figures emerging from the shadows, members of the court drawn by the commotion, servants peering from windows, guards forming a protective perimeter. And there, near the palace doors, Helena stood frozen with something that might have been fear finally flickering in her perfect features. "You want to know about worth?" Adrian continued, his silver eyes never leaving the assassin's purpling face. "Let me educate you." He threw the man to the ground with casual violence, then raised his voice so it carried across the entire courtyard. "Lyra Ashwood is the great-granddaughter of Luna Celeste Ravencrown, last of the ancient bloodline that ruled these lands before the kingdom was divided." Shocked whispers rippled through the gathered crowd. Lyra's own gasp was lost in the sudden cacophony of voices. Her mixed blood doesn't make her weak. It makes her the bridge between the old ways and the new, the healing our kingdom has needed for generations. Adrian's gaze swept the assembly with regal authority. "She is my chosen mate, my equal in all things, and the future queen of the Northern Territories." "That's impossible," Helena's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "She's nobody. She's nothing. I would have known if she was—" "You knew exactly what she was." Adrian's attention shifted to Helena with the focus of a predator selecting prey. "Just as you knew that Alpha Marcus was feeding you lies about divided councils and questioned loyalty. Just as you knew that sending an assassin was the act of a traitor to the crown." Helena's face went white. Around her, the noble daughters who'd been her allies began stepping away, distancing themselves from the suddenly toxic association. "I was protecting the kingdom, Helena whispered. You were protecting your own wounded pride. Adrian moved toward her with the same predatory grace he'd shown the assassin. Guards, arrest Lady Helena Ashwood on charges of treason and conspiracy to commit murder. No. Lyra's voice rang out across the courtyard, surprising everyone, including herself. She stepped forward, her chin lifted despite the tremor in her hands. She's not worth it. Adrian stopped, his silver eyes finding hers. Lyra. She's already lost everything that mattered to her, Lyra continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Her reputation, her standing at court, the respect of her peers. Let her live with that. Let her live knowing that the half-blood bastard she tried to destroy is going to be queen. A slow smile spread across Adrian's features, pride and love blazing in his expression. As you wish, my lady. This isn't over, Helena hissed, but the threat fell flat. She looked small and petty and powerless, everything Lyra had once believed herself to be. Yes, Lyra said quietly, it is. Adrian stepped forward and offered her his hand. The same gesture he'd made in the ballroom, what felt like a lifetime ago. Dance with me. There was no music, no elegant gowns or glittering chandelier, just moonlight and cobblestones and the weight of a dozen watching eyes. But when Lyra placed her hand in his, when he drew her close against his chest, it felt like the most important dance of her life. I'm sorry, she whispered against his shoulder. I was afraid. I thought if I left... I know. His hand stroked through her hair, gentle despite the violence that had just passed. But you don't get to make that choice for both of us. If we're going to face challenges, we face them together. The council will accept what I tell them to accept, and if they don't, I'll find new council members who will. He pulled back to meet her eyes. I am the Alpha King, Lyra. My word is law, and I choose you. Even knowing it might cost you everything. You are everything. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. Without you, nothing else matters. The golden thread between them flared brighter than the sun, and for the first time since the night of the ball, Lyra let herself believe it. Let herself accept that maybe, just maybe, she really was worth fighting for. Around them, the courtyard had fallen silent except for the soft whisper of wind through the flowering trees. Even the guards seemed to be holding their breath, witnessing something sacred and inevitable. When Adrian lowered his head to kiss her, Lyra rose on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was soft and fierce and full of promises, of protection and partnership, and a love that would burn bright enough to light the way through any darkness. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Ready to be queen? Lyra looked around the courtyard at the faces watching them, some supportive, some uncertain, some openly hostile. But for the first time in her life, she didn't see judgment in those stares. She saw her people, her future subjects, the kingdom she would help Adrian guide into a new era of acceptance and unity. Yes, she said, and meant it. I'm ready. 3 months later, Lyra stood on the palace balcony, watching the sunrise paint the kingdom in shades of gold and rose, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly, where their first child grew safe and strong. The woman who had once hidden in shadows, believing herself to be nothing, was gone. In her place stood the Lunar Queen of the Northern Territories, confident in her purpose and secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. There had been challenges, council members who needed convincing, neighbouring kingdoms who tested the new queen's resolve, old prejudices that required patient dismantling. But Adrian had been beside her through all of it, his unwavering faith in her becoming the foundation on which she built her own strength. "You're up early?" Adrian's voice came from behind her, warm with sleepy affection. Strong arms encircled her waist as he pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck, his hands settling protectively over hers. "The baby's active this morning," she murmured, leaning back against his chest. I think he's going to be an early riser like his father. He? Just a feeling. She turned in his arms, marvelling as she did every morning at the way his silver eyes softened when he looked at her. 3 months of marriage, and he still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Though if she takes after me, she'll prefer staying up late reading forbidden books. Forbidden books? Adrian raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned about what my queen is reading? Ancient texts about lunar magic, Lyra admitted with a grin. Turns out my great-grandmother left quite a legacy in the palace libraries. I've been learning about the old ways, the traditions we lost when the bloodlines were scattered. It had been one of the most beautiful discoveries of the past months, connecting with the heritage she'd never known she possessed. Luna Celesta's journals were filled with wisdom about healing, about bringing divided communities together, about ruling with compassion rather than fear. Everything Lyra had instinctively wanted to do, but had never believed she was worthy of attempting. "And what has Queen Luna Celeste taught you this week?" Adrian asked, settling beside her on the stone bench they'd had placed to catch the morning light. "That mixed-blood children aren't an accident or an aberration. They're the future." Lyra's hand moved in gentle circles over her belly. The old magic and the new combined to create something stronger than either could be alone. They'd already begun implementing changes throughout the kingdom, new laws protecting mixed heritage wolves, schools that taught the history of all bloodlines rather than just the dominant ones, healing centres that combined traditional wolf medicine with lunar arts that had been forgotten for generations. The resistance had been minimal, helped along by the fact that several neighbouring kingdoms had reached out seeking alliances after news spread of the Lunar Queen's return. Apparently, having the descendant of the legendary Raven Crown line on the throne carried more political weight than anyone had anticipated. "Speaking of the future," Adrian said, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket, "I have something for you. Adrian, you've already given me everything, the crown, the kingdom, your heart. This is different." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver chain holding a pendant that seemed to glow with inner light. "It belonged to Luna Celeste. I found it in the vault with her journals." Lyra's breath caught as she recognised the symbol etched into the pendant, a wolf and a crown intertwined, surrounded by phases of the moon. "I can't take this. It's too precious, too important." "It belongs with you." Adrian lifted the chain from its box, his fingers gentle as he fastened it around her neck. "You're not just wearing the title of Lunar Queen, Lyra. You're becoming everything she was, a bridge between worlds, a healer of old wounds, a leader who rules with love rather than fear." The pendant settled against her skin with a warmth that felt like coming home. For just a moment she could have sworn she felt an echo of recognition, as if her great-grandmother's spirit approved of the woman who now carried on her legacy. "The council meeting this afternoon," Adrian continued. "Lord Blackthorn wants to discuss the proposal for the new healing academies, and Alpha Marcus has requested an audience." "Marcus?" Lyra's voice sharpened slightly. Helena's former ally had been notably absent from court since the night of the assassination attempt. "He wants to formally apologise and request alliance terms." Adrian's smile held a hint of satisfaction. Apparently, several of his most influential pack members have mixed heritage children who would benefit from the new educational policies. His position against our union has become politically inconvenient. "And Helena?" "Still in exile with your stepmother. Last report had them living quietly in the southern provinces." Adrian's expression grew serious. "Do you ever regret showing her mercy?" Lyra considered the question, watching a pair of sparrows chase each other through the flowering vines below. Once, Helena's hatred had defined her world, made her believe she was worthless and unwanted. Now her sister's opinion seemed as distant and irrelevant as yesterday's weather. "No," she said finally. "She has to live knowing that everything she tried to destroy flourished without her. That's punishment enough." A soft knock at the balcony door interrupted them. Marie appeared with a curtsy, her face glowing with excitement. "Forgive the intrusion, your majesties, but there's someone here to see Queen Lyra. Lady Roslyn Ravencrown has arrived from the Eastern Kingdoms." Lyra's heart stopped. Ravencrown, her mother's family, the relatives she'd believed were all dead, lost to the same plague that had claimed her mother's life. "My aunt," she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "She's alive." "Very much so, my lady, and she's brought several family members with her. It seems word of the Lunar Queen's return has spread farther than we thought." Adrian squeezed Lyra's hand. "Shall we go meet your family?" Family, real family who shared her blood and her heritage, who might have stories about her mother and traditions to pass down to her unborn child. Lyra blinked back tears of overwhelming gratitude. "Yes," she said, rising with the grace she'd learned from months of queenly training. "Let's go meet them." The great hall was buzzing with excitement when they arrived. A small group of travellers stood near the massive fireplace, travel-stained but elegant, with the unmistakable bearing of nobility. At their centre stood a woman who could have been Lyra's mother's twin, silver-streaked dark hair, warm brown eyes, and the same stubborn chin that Lyra saw in her own mirror. "Aunt Roslyn?" Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. The woman turned, and her face crumpled with emotion. "Sweet Luna above, you look exactly like Celeste did at your age. Child, we've been searching for you for 20 years. They met in the centre of the hall, aunt and niece embracing with the desperate relief of family long lost and finally found. Around them, the court watched with respectful silence, witnessing the healing of wounds that had festered for generations. "I thought you were all dead," Lyra sobbed against her aunt's shoulder. "Mother said the plague—" "Scattered us, yes, killed some of us, but the Ravencrown line is stronger than one plague, stronger than one war." Roslyn pulled back to cup Lyra's face in her hands. "We've been rebuilding, gathering the survivors, waiting for a sign that it was safe to emerge. And then word came of a Lunar Queen with mixed blood who was healing the divisions between the old ways and the new. You came because of the political implications. We came because family answers when family calls." Roslyn's smile was radiant, even when that call comes in the form of a coronation announcement rather than a letter. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of introductions and stories, of learning about cousins and uncles and traditions that had been preserved in secret throughout the scattered Ravencrown communities. Lyra's child would grow up knowing exactly where they came from, surrounded by family who would teach them the old songs and the ancient magics, and the responsibility that came with their bloodline. As evening fell, and the last of the reunion festivities wound down, Lyra found herself back on the balcony with Adrian, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Any regrets?" he asked, echoing their morning conversation. She considered the question seriously, thinking of the frightened girl in the borrowed dress who had believed she would never be chosen by anyone. That girl was gone now, transformed into a woman who had chosen herself, chosen to believe in her own worth, chosen to accept love, chosen to embrace a destiny she'd never imagined possible. "Only one," she said finally. Adrian's eyebrows rose. "Oh? I regret that it took me so long to believe I deserved this." She gestured to encompass the palace, the kingdom, the family waiting below, the child growing beneath her heart. All of it. You most of all. "You deserved it from the beginning," Adrian said fiercely. "You were always everything, Lyra. You just needed to see it." "I see it now." She turned in his arms, rising on her toes to press a soft kiss to his lips. "I see all of it. The kingdom we're building, the family we're creating, the future we're shaping together." "And what do you see in that future, my queen?" Lyra smiled, her hand moving to rest over their child, her aunt's laughter drifting up from the hall below, the warmth of the mate bond wrapping around them both like a blessing. Everything," she whispered against his lips. "I see everything." And in the distance, barely audible over the evening wind, She could have sworn she heard the whisper of an ancient voice, her great-grandmother's voice carried on the breeze. "Welcome home, little Luna, welcome home." The golden thread that connected her to Adrian pulsed with warmth and contentment as they stood together on the threshold of tomorrow, no longer a broken girl and a lonely king, but partners in every sense of the word, equals who had chosen each other and fought for each other and would rule together with wisdom and love for all the years to come. Where are you listening from? I'd love to meet you in the comments and hear which part of Lyra and Adrian's story resonated most with you. If you enjoyed this tale of finding worth in love and love in worthiness, please subscribe. It's free and it helps more people discover these stories of hope and healing. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful magic is simply believing you're worthy of love.